Have you ever heard the whispered tales of the Vikings, not just as raiders and explorers, but as saviors of their world? Today, we're diving deep into a forgotten saga, a story etched not in stone, but in the echoes of the Elder Futhark runes, the epic war between the Norsemen and the Elvenland giants. Our story begins not in the fjords of Scandinavia, but in a realm that brushes against our own, Alfheim, the land of the elves, for centuries the Loselfar. The Light Elves lived in a delicate balance with the Jotna, the giants who roamed the misty, mountainous borders of their luminous kingdom. These weren't the brutish giants of Midgard folklore. The Elvenland giants were ancient, wise, and infused with the primal magic of the earth. Their skin was like living granite, and their eyes held the cold light of distant stars. They were guardians of the old ways, keepers of secrets the elves themselves had long forgotten. But this balance was shattered. A blight, a creeping corruption born from the shadowed heart of the ironwood, began to poison the giants' minds. It twisted their ancient wisdom into raw, destructive rage. Their granite skin cracked, weeping a dark, magical ichor, and their starry eyes burned with a malevolent fire. They turned on the elves, their immense power now a tool of chaos. The once serene borders of Alfheim became a war zone. The elves, for all their grace and magic, were artisans and scholars, not warriors built to withstand a siege of living mountains. Their luminous cities began to crumble under the relentless assault of their former neighbors. In their desperation, the elven queen, Lyra, performed a forbidden ritual. She wove a strand of starlight with a tear of sorrow and cast a plea across the Bifrost, the shimmering rainbow bridge that connects the 9 realms. It wasn't a call for gods or mythical beasts. It was a call for mortals, a call for those whose hearts burned with a fire fierce enough to match the giant's rage. The call reached Midgard, our world, and was answered by a people renowned for their unyielding spirit and battle prowess. The Vikings, leading this daring expedition, was a Jarl like any other, Bjorn Ironhide, a descendant of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. Bjorn wasn't just a brute. He was a visionary. He saw the elven plea not as a request for aid, but as a challenge worthy of the gods themselves. He rallied the fiercest shield maidens and berserkers from across the Northlands. These weren't raiders seeking gold. They were warriors answering a call to a saga that would be sung for eternity. They loaded their longships not just with axes and shields, but with the courage of a people who laughed in the face of death. As their dragon-headed prows cut through the ethereal seas between worlds, the Vikings arrived in a land beyond their wildest dreams. They saw crystalline towers piercing clouds of spun gold and forests where the leaves shimmered with eternal light. But they also saw the devastation, crumbled spires, scorched earth, and the terrifying sight of the corrupted giants, their silhouettes blotting out the twin sons of Alfheim. The elves greeted them with a mixture of hope and skepticism. How could these mortals, with their crude iron and loud voices, stand against beings of pure elemental force? The first encounter was a brutal lesson. The Vikings charged, axes held high, their war cries echoing through the crystalline valleys. But their steel, the finest Midgard had to offer, merely skittered off the giants' enchanted hides. A single swipe from a giant's arm sent warriors flying like dolls. The Vikings' raw strength was not enough. They were outmatched, their courage faltering against an enemy they couldn't wound. Defeated and humbled, Bjorn Ironhide didn't despair. He sought out the Elven Queen. He saw that this was not a war of muscle, but a war of wit and magic. He proposed an alliance that would forever change both their peoples. He asked the elves not to fight for them, but to fight with them. Your magic, our fury, he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. Your knowledge, our steel. Thus began the great forging. The elven smiths, masters of celestial metals, opened their armories. They took the Vikings' mundane iron axes and shields and began a process of enchantment. They quenched the steel not in water, but in the captured light of a supernova. They hammered runes onto the blades, not with hammers, but with focused beams of starlight. Each rune was a word of power, a concept given form: sunder, pierce, banish. The Vikings' familiar axes were reborn. An axe that once just chopped would now hum with cosmic energy, its edge sharp enough to slice through the very fabric of magic. Shields once made of wood and iron were now woven with spells of deflection, capable of turning aside a blow that could shatter a mountain. The shield maidens were given bows strung with unicorn hair, firing arrows that didn't just fly, but sought out the magical weakness in a giant's form. The berserkers, whose rage was their greatest weapon, were taught elven chants to focus their fury into a precise, unstoppable force. The transformation was profound. It was the perfect fusion of two worlds, the raw, untamed spirit of humanity combined with the ancient, refined magic of the elves. The Vikings were no longer just warriors. They were living weapons, conduits of a power neither race could wield alone. With their enchanted gear and newfound tactics, the Vikings launched their counterattack. The battle that followed was the stuff of legends. Picture this: a corrupted giant, 20 stories tall, swings a massive club made from a petrified tree. A lone shield maiden stands her ground. She raises her shimmering shield, and as the club connects, it doesn't just block the blow, it disintegrates the club into a shower of glowing dust. The giant roars in disbelief, and in that moment of hesitation, two berserkers, their bodies glowing with channeled rage, leap from a cliff, their enchanted axes humming with the sunder. Rune cleave through the giant's granite leg. The creature stumbles, its magical essence bleeding out. Bjorn Ironhide himself, wielding an axe named Starlight's Bite, led the charge. He was a whirlwind of steel and fury, a mortal man dancing a deadly waltz with gods. He didn't just fight. He orchestrated. He used Viking shield wall formations, but now the shield wall was a moving fortress of magical repulsion. He commanded his archers to target not the giants' bodies, but the glowing, corrupt sigils that had appeared on their skin, the very source of the Blight's control. The turning point came at the siege of the Crystal Spire, the heart of the Elven kingdom. The largest of the giants, the one who first fell to the Blight, stood as the final guardian. It was a being of immense power, its very presence warping reality around it. The sky churned and the ground wept dark magic. It was here that the ultimate strategy was unveiled. The elves, protected by the Viking phalanx, began a great chant. It wasn't a song of war, but a song of healing, a melody of pure light designed to cleanse the Blight, but they needed time. Bjorn and his Vikings had to hold the line against the ultimate embodiment of chaos. They formed a ring of steel and light around the chanting elves, a final, desperate stand. For every Viking that fell, their place was instantly taken. They fought with a ferocity that stunned even the elves, a joyful acceptance of a glorious death in the service of a saga. As the elven song reached its crescendo, a brilliant pillar of light erupted from the crystal spire. It washed over the battlefield, a wave of pure, unadulterated magic. It didn't harm the Vikings, who were shielded by their own fierce spirit, but for the giants, it was like cool water on a fevered brow. The dark ichor evaporated. The malevolent fire in their eyes dimmed, replaced by the ancient, starry wisdom of old. The Blight was purged. The giants, confused but no longer enraged, ceased their attack. They looked at their own hands, at the destruction they had wrought, with a dawning horror and sorrow. The war was over, not with a final bloody climax, but with an act of cosmic healing. The Vikings had not just defeated the giants. They had saved them. They had held back the tide of darkness long enough for the light to win. In the aftermath, the bond between the elves and the Vikings was sealed in starlight and blood. The elves bestowed upon them the title Elf Friends and gifted them treasures beyond mortal imagination, maps of the hidden pathways between worlds, seeds from the life-giving Yggdrasil tree, and knowledge of runes that could shape reality. Bjorn Ironhide led his people home, their longships heavy with elven gifts and their hearts full of a story that would become the most sacred of their hidden sagas. They returned not just as heroes, but as beings changed, touched by the magic of another world. And though this story may not be found in our history books, it lives on, a testament to the day when the raw fury of the Vikings allied with the ancient magic of the elves to defeat an army of giants and save a kingdom of light. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the lost sagas. If you love tales of myth and magic, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Until then, stay curious.